talk about choice. It's inspired by a chat I was having with my mother about this. She was talking about learning something about chakras and how, as many of us probably know, they're different colors based on the colors of the rainbow, and there's 7 main chakras, and how they all affect, or how they all can affect different aspects of your life, or relate to different parts of the body and the energy system, right? And how they can affect our, of course, emotionality and psychology, spirituality even, depending on how much we choose to believe in that system, how much we opt to align with that particular paradigm. And in my years of research and study, I've come across people who are vehemently against the idea of chakras, suggesting that it's simply another layer of imposition, another system of control and manipulation. And I can see that argument, because it's simply another aspect of the human avatar, the human energetic system, that again can be weaponized against us, or as a convenient excuse for people who are prone to looking for reasons and excuses for being and behaving and feeling and acting in certain ways. It's just another out for poor health, poor behavior, poor life problems, and endless contrast and conflict both within and without. So if we, just like any other condition that we may have based on a diagnosis from someone as a member of cartel medicine, they have thousands and thousands of things that they can ascribe anything that occurs in the body in any sort of damaged or out of balance sort of system, such as diabetes or some other condition that's very easily remedied and reversible. It's just another one of those things that we can attach our identity to, attach our decision making to, that can be essentially a crutch that is more used as a substitute for genuine choice making, a substitute for perhaps free will, which is essentially an extension of choice, perhaps the main framework of choice. Free will and choice, they're essentially, in my view, one and the same. Because regardless of our circumstances and situation, we always have choice. It's just a matter of the range and value and scope of these choices that we can make. And that can be seen perhaps as a cold or callous perspective, but in reality, this life is very short and very temporary, so we need to put things into proper perspective. Whether you're in a gulag or internment camp, imprisoned, or a slave that's beaten every day, there are certain choices that you can make in that circumstance. Of course, it's not ideal, as it would be for someone in the polar opposite of that has the freedom to choose every day whether or not they sleep in or get up, using an alarm. I mean, these are extremes, obviously. And a different variety of choices are available to each single human individual. And that's what's unique about this earthbound experience. If there are allegedly billions of us, there are billions of variations of this theme. And again, it's also very transient and temporary. We need to remember, one lifetime that can be, anywhere between even a few hours to 80, 90, 100 years in length. That's a blip. That's nothing. So while you're here, while you're aware, while you're cognizant, you have that choice, you have that free will. And I know a lot of people and a lot of religions and a lot of spiritual paradigms ascribe certain ideas and energy to the construct of choice and free will. And we use it and try to use it to cope and to contend with all the ideas and stories and narratives and impositions and perhaps assaults and attacks that this world can introduce and intervene and intrude upon in our lives, where we effectively are giving up a certain amount, as I mentioned, a range of choices given our circumstances and situation. And it's also a convenient out, again, even for religions and such, this idea of free will and choice. So we can choose to be assholes all week long, and then, one day a week you can go and ask forgiveness and all is well again, the slate is clean, which I think is childish nonsense, but there are hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of people who believe in such a manner, and I think that's completely destructive and nonsensical. It doesn't serve the true and authentic human being. You can't, again, as I was speaking previously, you can't lie to yourself. And if you think that you can just simply push these things away by professing of your sins and stupidity and bad behavior, and that all is well again, so that you can go back to doing what you were doing freely, you have the choice to behave in such a manner and to believe such things and to act in such ways, and you can find certain ways to excuse and to compartmentalize these ideas and behaviors and uses and abuses of the ideas of choice and free will. It's completely up to you. Are you being truthful? Are you being genuine? Are you being honest? Does it matter? I don't know. I certainly can't judge you. And ultimately, there is no real judgment. That's another layer of imposition introduced into this realm, perpetuated by the controllers and the religious paradigm and those who proliferate that control system on humanity. Fear of judgment, whether it's in this life or the next. It's just another game, another way to confuse and conflate and obfuscate what it is that you really are. And there's absolutely no need for it when you really learn to pull back and view this from a different perspective, the purpose of your being here in the first place. So again, all of these impositions and ideas and these constructs and frameworks will affect our choice making and our idea of free will in any particular circumstance and any culture and society of the world. So whether you're homeless, whether you're an addict, whether you're a prisoner or slave, you have choice. You have free will. A certain range of it, a certain capacity of it, a certain way to express that idea. Whether you're a king or a president or a, CEO of a multinational corporation, you also have choice. You have a range of certain choices and capacities for it. Your reality is framed in a different way, but it's based on the same framework as anyone else. And then, of course, we live on the spectrum of anything in between from those two extremes, as I've described. So regardless of your situation or circumstance, you always do have choice. It might not be ideal, but how would you know otherwise? Unless you were exposed to greater ideas. And then as soon as you are exposed to some different spectrum of ideas or beliefs or potentialities, that changes your whole spectrum of choice, doesn't it? As soon as you're exposed to new information or a new experience, someone new comes into your life that offers up different ideas that challenge your established parameters and your established belief system and paradigms, you now have a different range, a different scope of choices, don't you? So it is upon us, the individual, ultimately, as it is with anything, what we choose to do with that information, how we choose to disempower or empower ourselves with these things. Every day we're making dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of choices. We are doing it largely unconsciously, of course, right? Throughout a lifetime of, tens of thousands of days, how many choices do you think that is? And of course, most of them won't really make any sort of significant difference. And again, it depends how much you ascribe to any individual choice or inflection point or milestone along the way, depending on how consciously you are going through this one short life. In any moment, you can choose differently. You can choose an alternative. You can choose to view something with different eyes. You can view it from someone else's perspective, instantly changing your entire paradigm. Something extreme or traumatic or surprising can happen, which completely, again, shocks your entire foundation, your belief system, and you're given a choice. You have the freedom of will to move in a different direction, instantly and permanently. And one could argue probably fairly that this is uniquely to the human experience in this earthly realm. We can see how our pets and our beasts act in certain ways, and they have perhaps a certain capacity for choice, but they will usually defer to the higher, more complex beings such as us. They will usually rely on us, especially if they are domesticated. In the wild, it's speculation. We can study behaviors of animals and see what kind of choices they make, again, determined by their environment, determined, of course, by their chemical and genetic makeup, and determined on what it is required for them in their particular life expression to live out their purpose and their meaning and what they are here to do. And their lives are even more brief than ours, aren't they? So just getting back to the idea of the whole chakra system, or the atomization or fragmentation of the human vessel, the human avatar, the human body, and how we are generally conditioned in the modern era through our scientific, materialistic lens to break things down as if we're some sort of machine, which is nonsensical. You know, in this very simplistic, reductionist sense, sure, we are a machine, and that's what, you know, cartel medicine trains their practitioners, doctors, nurses, and surgeons and such to believe. They literally have to break down and destroy the natural human inclinations and intuitions and ideas and perspectives and rewrite it and superimpose this idea of the mechanistic, materialistic, nonsensical, scientific paradigm. And therein lies a disgusting and disturbing eventuality, because they have to essentially suppress their natural impulses and perspectives and feelings and potentialities and defer to the machine of the system of the pharmaceutical industry, because it is a for-profit machine that requires obedience and complicity. And when you are consistently, you know, in the top 3, top 5 leading causes of injury and death in the modern world, especially in the United States, purportedly, you know, the leaders in medical science, that's not something to be proud of. Regardless, when we think of ourselves as machines and made up of pieces, and thinking that we need specialists for, you know, every organ and every limb, every body system, we fragment our energy and our concept, and we have to remember that everything reduces to one. We are one individual, one soul, one avatar, one unique expression. It's between us and God and Source and the All. We are fragmentations, if anything, if you even want to consider it that way. We're a fractal of that All. So in this body is one system. It's not 7 chakras, 12 chakras. It's not billions and trillions of cells. That's one way to perceive it and look at it and examine it. But it is one system, and it's holistic. It all works together. You can't have behaviors and practices and a diet perhaps that's beating up on, say, your liver, and think it's not going to affect the entire system. The rest of the system is going to compensate and make up for that damage that you're doing and keep you alive as best it can. Your body heals. That's it. It adapts. That's all. That's all it is ever doing for you. And it is your body, your vessel, your temporary container for this earthbound experience in this life. Treat it as you will, but don't be surprised when it starts breaking down because you're misusing and abusing it. And don't think that by taking out one organ, one piece, or, you know, doing surgery to one aspect of it isn't going to affect the all, because it is all trying to work together in harmony, in unison, one energy field, one equation, one algorithm, one consciousness. Your individuation is one system, one, under God, under Source, whatever you want to call it. So when it comes to choice and free will, all of that also is, in our modern era, it tends to be fragmented, atomized and such too. Our psychology and our emotionality can be fragmented and split up into hundreds and hundreds of different places. We're worried about the future. We're stuck in the past because of injury or trauma, what have you, and we're rarely in the present, in the one place, in the now, the only time that actually exists, and we forget. So we give away all of these energies and creative capacities to things that don't exist anywhere except in our mind, in our perception, in our so-called memory. So if you're consistently worried about tomorrow, or consistently angry, resentful, and frustrated about what you were, what you did, what was done to you in the past, you're forgetting that the only power that exists is in the now. You change the past by altering your perspective of it. That's all you can do. You can change the past. You can alter, of course, the future by changing who you are now. And that's the only time you can actually make any effective changes to yourself, to your story, to what you choose, to how you utilize your free will. This idea of choice, of course, is it's a difficult one to contend with, because we don't want to believe that, when it comes to the idea of sex trafficking or child trafficking, that those individuals chose that. And of course, I'm just expressing my opinion, my perspective on the idea, and trying, as I generally approach these things from a more overview, principle sort of perspective. Of course, these things are terrible and unfortunate, and we would wish them to be unnecessary and easier to erase from existence. But they exist. They are part of this reality, part of this human experience. Just like anything else across the spectrum between good and evil, black or white. It's all here. It all only matters here. So whatever variation of experience that we ultimately choose to come into, I'm not trying to legitimize that kind of nastiness and that darkness and that shadow underworld that exists in our realm. But it exists, right? So we can choose how we view that. We can choose to put it in a greater perspective. And that's not suggesting that we're passive and simply allowing and complacent about it either. That's a different conversation entirely. I'm talking more specific in the generality, in the realm of choice and free will. So don't misconstrue the words and the idea I'm trying to present here. Expanding on the idea of choice beyond this earthly existence, doesn't it make sense that on some level we would have chosen where to come in, who to come in as, who to have as parents, what kind of life story we want to experience and experiment with and interrogate this go round? Doesn't that make sense? It's not like we're forced into this place or trapped, because that doesn't really compute given the nature of this realm or the capacity we have for choice and that free will that I'm speaking about. So doesn't it make sense on some level? We chose virtually everything about what we would experience in this life. I think it does, because it's not an excuse or an accommodation for the terrible ways that, given our perception and perspective, the truly terrible, brutal, and violent ways that we can experience life. However, as I'm saying, it only exists here. It only works in this particular realm. It's only part of the spectrum of this earthly, this reality, this material experience. And we don't take it with us. If anything, it'll just be another, notch on the belt of Humanity 101, or our human experience, the human journal. So that's another thing to consider in the grand scope, again, in the bigger picture of things, that we most likely would have chosen many of the parameters of this particular life and this particular kind of incarnation, if you want to call it that. So knowing something like that, given that particular framework, does it help you in your life? Does it help you put a different perspective, use a different perception on your particular life experience, your family relationships, and your friends and family and all the rest of it, your social connections, and your particular journey in this life? Does it help? Or does it make things worse? Or does it make you more resentful, angry, confused? Again, that's all a choice. You're free to view it in any particular way, but I think given the right perspective, we can learn to let go of these burdensome and negative perspectives and identity attachments that are bringing us down and frustrating and making us confused and angry and anxious and paranoid, whatever it might be, resentful, rageful, given anything in this particular life experience, anything in this lifetime that we see as painful and struggle and suffering. But that being said, more information doesn't necessarily mean greater understanding or comprehension, but it does perhaps affect, again, I was saying that range of choice making, that sense making, that paradigm shifting idea. Given more experience, given more information, we can reframe things and choose differently, perhaps choose, better, but choose more perhaps accurately based on who we are now. These are ideas that have been approached and broached philosophically by, far greater minds and far more erudite and capable philosophers throughout recorded history. So these modern turns of phrase and ways of approaching and exploring these notions, it's nothing new. There's literally nothing new under the sun. But the point I'm trying to come across here, I guess, given the nature of things I talk about and what I've tried to express through my writings and works over the years, is the idea of remembering and, ideas of uplifting the self and being able to come into a place of a greater understanding of the whole nature of this realm, what it is, who we are, why we're here, that kind of stuff. So the idea of choice and free will are rather integral to this whole process, aren't they? And I think we're far too easily dissuaded or convinced to defer to someone else's authority, to someone else's, perhaps, experience, understanding, capacity. To alleviate our pain or suffering and struggle, we want someone else to save us, to make decisions for us, to choose, or to help us choose better. And to a degree, yeah, that's what relationships and family and friends and communication is all about, because someone else's experience may help you inform your decisions better, of course. That's the point. Just like when you accumulate experience and knowledge and wisdom through your life, others will turn to you, and you will be able to offer something in that moment based on, hundreds of thousands and millions of choices that you've made along your path, and how you were able to discern better about whatever particular circumstance might be relevant in the moment. So remember that this idea of choice, this idea of free will is yours alone. And it is unique to you. And that you're not going to be judged either way. Again, you have to remember what is most important about you, what is most essential about you is, it's the immortal within. You're an aspect of that greater picture, that greater experience of the whole, the source. So put things into a different perspective if they're weighing you down, if they're consistently taking the wind out of your sails, as it were. You can choose. Choose wisely.